Welcome to day 17. We have read Genesis chapter 16 through Genesis chapter 18, and we are continuing our reading and our understanding of the book of Genesis. But before we get into that, thank you so much for taking a moment to view this video. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're finding the reading plan enjoyable and you're learning a lot and you're sharing a lot as we all read the Bible together. If you have not yet accepted the invitation to be a part of the yearly Bible reading program, you can check the description box below. It will take you directly to the YouVersion Bible app, where you'll be able to join many people throughout the country reading the Bible together every single day and leaving incredible feedback concerning what they're learning. If you're accessing the link through a desktop or a laptop, please make sure you have your phone handy, and you can just take your phone and you can use the screenshot, or rather use the QR code to access the YouVersion Bible app, or you can access it directly from your phone. It'll take you directly to the app to join the club. So listen, thank you so much for considering it. Hope you'll join us in this year's reading. Now, today we read Genesis chapter 16 through Genesis chapter 18, and we find that this study is filled with a continual dramatic story about Abraham and this incredible promise that God has given him concerning having a child, being a blessing to so many people in the world, and also inheriting land. And those are three of the really critical components of the relationship that God shares with Abraham. It is that he will make him famous, he will make him the father of many nations, he will give him land. And so this promise is made to him, but also made to his descendants. And there are a few things that just stood out in an incredible way. Notably, in chapter 16, the fact that Abram tries to rush, if you will, God's promises by participating in a plan that was orchestrated by Sarai, who is getting impatient with God and not willing to wait for what God has promised. So out of that comes a marriage with Hagar and a child who is literally described as a wild man. But the thing that's interesting about this is, while this wild child is cast away because he's not the child of promise, God makes a promise to his mother that he will be a nation in and of himself. He will become a nation. And the revelation she gets from that is that there is a God that sees her. And I love that El Roy, that we see the God who sees us, the God that sees me. And so it's a very incredible story to think through, but it also shows us the ramification of Abram's decision and how that will ultimately impact his descendants' life in the future. But then there's also the covenant, the name change in chapter 17, where he becomes no longer Abram, but he is now Abraham, the father of nations, if you will, or the father of many. It's just an incredible expression of God's faithfulness and God's willingness to use Abraham, because, as you know, name changes are significant in the Bible. In fact, names in general are significant, and surely when a person's name is changed, it signifies a life change or a change in character. And so, if you can think about this, in chapter 16, Abram makes a very poor decision, if you will. But then in chapter 17, God renews the covenant with them and then changes his name, as almost to say, who you were, what you did in chapter 16 will not affect or impact what I promised you before your act. And to confirm that, here's a name change to prove that, and to confirm that I am actually going to continue with what I have promised. Now, in chapter 17, in chapter 17 is where the name change happens. But also in chapter 17, we see a very important initiation of a sign, a covenant mark. And that covenant mark, that sign of covenant faithfulness, a covenant agreement, is circumcision, which, by the way, has more to do with the way one lives than it does just the simple act of being circumcised. And so in chapter 17, we find that Abraham is now in an agreement where he is responsible for keeping what verse 9 calls terms of a covenant, which means these promises are given to you, but there's an expectation that you must meet in order for you to maintain a proper relationship with the one who promises. And that condition, if you will, or that term, I won't say a condition, but that term is circumcision. Everyone who is a part of this family of God, who is in this covenant relationship, is expected to be circumcised. So I think that's a good way to imagine, or if you will, think through our faith, that perhaps it wasn't the circumcision that got them the promise, but the circumcision was expected of those who held or who hold the promise. And the same thing is with us who believe. We don't do anything to earn salvation, but there are certain things expected of us, certain terms expected of us who do believe and who do have salvation. So we're never earning, but we're supposed to have a certain fruit, a certain output based on what we have gained from God and his faithfulness. Now, one of the things I love about chapter 18 is this notion that God trusted Abram to relay what he has learned and discovered about God to his children in a way that influences the way they live for God. In chapter 18, it tells us why God chose Abraham. And this is why. He says, I've singled him out so that he will direct his sons and their families to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. So when we think about Abraham, yes, he was the father of faith, but then on the other side of that, he was the one God could trust to build a family around the principles and the way that the Lord has directed them to take. He could be trusted with that. And I think it's so important for us when we think about people of faith, we think about Abraham, who is the father of faith, that we just don't think about the individual who gained righteousness by believing in God. But he was the one that gained righteousness because he believed in God, and he lived a certain way that was transferable to his children. In fact, he was the one who learned the way, who discovered the way, if you will, and then he passed it along to his children, who were expected to pass it along to their children, and it becomes a family affair. Everyone living in the way of the Lord. That's what real faith is all about, by the way. It is not simply believing things about God, but it's believing the way that God has prescribed for us to live and walking in that in true obedience and in faithfulness. So this is a powerful, powerful set of chapters where, listen, if we read Abraham and then just pick the practical principles away from his life, we'll learn what it means to be a Christian, because for all intents and purposes, he is the epitome of what a faith-filled individual really is. And so we're learning so much, and we have all types of shadows and types and all sorts of principles and parallels that we can build. And so hopefully you're picking up on some of these as you read yourself. But listen, let's continue to read. We have so much more to go. We're going to spend a few more chapters in the life of Abram, and then we're going to learn about Isaac and Jacob, and then ultimately we'll end the book with Joseph. And this is going to be a segue into one of the most important books of the Old Testament, the book of Exodus. So we have a ways to go, but keep on reading. Congratulations, you're still trucking along here, and I hope you will continue to do so throughout the year, because you'll be so much better by the end of the year than you are now, because you're allowing the Word of God to get into your heart. So let's keep reading, let's keep pushing. Until next time, thank you for watching. Take care, God bless, and live by the Word.